Now, believe it or not, that's supposed to be a mixing board. These are supposed to be speakers. This is supposed to be the back of an amplifier, and this is supposed to be the front of an amplifier. Now look, here's our mixing board. We have two wires running out of it into input 1 and 2 on our amplifier. Now they're backwards because we're looking at the back of the amp, but it doesn't really matter. It's stereo left and right, left, right. Then we have a switch. The switch says stereo and bridge mono. Well, since we're running two inputs, we're running stereo, so we have to have this switched over to the stereo position. Now, there could be a position on the switch called parallel mono. Let's not mess with that today. Nobody does anyway. So, just make sure your switch is definitely in the stereo position when you're running in stereo. Now here are the outputs. Output 1 and output 2. Now notice each output has a red and a black post. The red post is positive, the black post is negative. You have a positive and a negative lead for each speaker. And then here is the front of the amp, channel 1 and channel 2. You have volume controls. Both of these volume controls, when you're running in stereo, should be in the same position. I've got them cranked all the way up to 10 right now, but they could very easily be at 3 o'clock or 12 o'clock or whatever you want your amp volume to be. This diagram looks different. That's because this time we're running bridge mono. Let's start off with the mixing board. I'm running into a crossover here. Why? Because we're assuming that we're going to be running a sub in bridge mono. You don't usually want to run your high frequency speakers in bridge mono unless you've got a Mondo huge setup and you're biamping your top cabs. So forget all that right now. What we want to do is we want to make sure we're running the proper frequency to the sub amp. And the way we do that is we use a crossover. That's another video. I did a basic video on what crossovers do. I'll put a link to it to the right of this video. Anyhow, mixer to crossover, and then one lead out of the crossover into input 1 of the back of the amplifier. We don't use input 2 because we're dealing with mono here. Mono means one channel. Notice our switch is to bridge mono in this case. We don't have it in stereo. Very important, if you're running bridge mono, make sure you've got your switch flipped over to bridge mono. Now the outputs are very different too. Now what happens is, in bridge mono, like we talked about in the bridge mono video, basically you're taking the right side of the amplifier and the left side of the amplifier and combining them into one big amplifier. Now by doing that, we have to bridge the two sides somehow. By flipping the bridge mono switch, what happens is, what was the positive of output 2 becomes the negative. And the positive of output 1 becomes the positive for the overall bridge mono configuration. Now, the front of the amplifier looks different too. Channel 1's turned all the way up. Channel 2 is turned all the way down. Because we're only running one channel, and it's assuming it's this channel since that's our positive. Channel 1 all the way up, channel 2 all the way down. On that bridge mono setup, you wouldn't necessarily have to have the volume cranked up to 10. That's how I set mine. You could have it cranked up to 3/4 of the way if you wanted to. But at any rate, you turn the volume on channel 2 all the way down and use channel 1 to regulate your volume. There you have it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm trying to take you through step by step on this stuff. It's confusing. It's confusing for me too. So if you have questions or you're confused, please, you're not alone. Anyhow, there you go. Practice and enjoy.